Good morning, everybody. I'm Luke Evnin. I'm chairman of the board of the Scleroderma Research Foundation, the SRF, and I'm also a scleroderma patient. Just a little bit by way of personal introduction. I have a PhD in molecular biology, and I've been working as an investor in healthcare, founding, building, and financing biotechnology companies for the last 30 years. A bit about the SRF before we get started on the rest of the webinar today. The SRF is the nation's largest nonprofit investor in research, and its mission is funding research which aims to bring a cure to scleroderma forward. The foundation is singularly focused on this mission, allocating over 80% of its budget to this activity. And today it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to learn about one of the Scleroderma Research Foundation's largest projects, CONQUER, a nationwide longitudinal scleroderma patient registry. And stay tuned to learn what all of that actually means. Now, CONQUER is a project that the SRF and participating clinicians from 13 premier academic institutions have been working to realize over the past several years. And we're here to tell you about the substantial progress that we've made and a bit about our next steps. I'd also like to acknowledge our founding pharmaceutical partner, Boehringer Ingelheim, and our co-founding pharmaceutical partner, Actelion, which is a company in the Janssen family of companies. I will note that following today's presentation, there will be an opportunity for question and answer from you, our audience. To ask a question, open the Q&A window. It's an icon that looks like two speech bubbles, one on top of another. You type your question in there, and we'll select questions to answer live at the end of the presentation. But to get started, it's my honor to be here today with two of my CONQUER colleagues, Doctors Tracy Frech and Shervin Assassi, physician leaders in the scleroderma community and of the CONQUER effort. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, Dr. Tracy Frech serves as the director of the Scleroderma Clinic at the University of Utah and the director of clinical trials for the Division of Rheumatology. Her research interests include the vascular aspects of autoimmune disease, primarily vascular leak and scleroderma. She has published over 100 articles in peer-reviewed journals and several book chapters on scleroderma. She provides mentorship to medical students with a focus on improving their early research experiences. Within CONQUER, Tracy is the chair of the Biorepository and Data Quality Committee, which is responsible for ensuring the quality of the data and the biological samples that are collected throughout the registry. Dr. Shervin Assassi is the director of the Division of Rheumatology at the University of Texas, Houston, and he is the co-director of the scleroderma program at the McGovern Medical School. Dr. Assassi has been recognized as one of the top doctors by the Texas Monthly Magazine, all since 2015, excuse me. Shervin runs a very active research program at UT Houston. His current research interests include the correlation of clinical features of systemic sclerosis with genetic and gene expression data to identify novel drug targets and to develop clinically relevant biomarkers. Within CONQUER, Dr. Assassi is the chairman of the steering committee and runs the CONQUER Biorepository as its principal investigator. In this role, he directs and ensures the accurate and timely collection, storage, and retrieval of blood and other tissue samples. And with that, let me turn this over to Tracy.
Thank you so much, Luke. My pleasure to talk about CONQUER, which is a very large project aimed at improving care more efficiently, developing new therapies for systemic sclerosis, also known as scleroderma. The registry does not include localized scleroderma or morphia, but focuses on the systemic sclerosis or scleroderma patient population. The reason this is so important, it is the first project of its kind in the United States and brings together all the stakeholders that are dedicated to this mission. So the Scleroderma Research Foundation, scleroderma clinicians and patients, and pharmaceutical companies like BI are working together to create a national longitudinal registry for our systemic sclerosis patients. So what is a national longitudinal registry? This is really important because it's collecting clinical data from many systemic scleroderma patients from around the country in a single unified database that's aimed for research and discovery. This high quality clinical information is obtained at the time of just the routine doctor's visit. And we collect this over many years and enter it into a database for discovery work. This data will allow researchers and clinicians to learn as much as possible about all forms of systemic scleroderma in patients of all different backgrounds. And most importantly, because of the focus on early disease, how scleroderma progresses. So CONQUER is this nationwide registry that has the potential to become bigger and more powerful than any registry at any individual scleroderma. And that spirit of collaboration is particularly important. We include patients of all ethnicities that may not be represented in an individual center registry, allowing better discovery. A longitudinal registry allows researchers to follow patients over many years, which enables research about how scleroderma progresses. And many scleroderma centers participate, making it easier to do clinical trials. This is particularly important because every patient that's involved is important and can lead to discovery work. So what will we achieve with this registry? We want to perform research to improve patient care. We want to learn about how scleroderma progresses so we can stop it. And we can learn about which types of patients will benefit from specific clinical trials so that we can have more effective therapies available for our patients. The CONQUER data will help drug companies design better trials that are more likely to identify effective therapies. How does CONQUER work? Well, as a CONQUER patient, you would come into your routine clinic visit. And if you're participating, you would be consented for the registry so that all that very important patient data that we're gathering at your patient visit is put into this database. We also would obtain a sample at that clinical visit. Now, the sample or biospecimen goes to Dr. Assassi at the University of Utah, Texas at Houston. And he's put in extremely important measures for top quality biomarker work. The clinical data is stored at the Data Coordinating Center at University of Utah. And this is a specific institute that does top level data collection and has measures in place to keep that data very secure. And together, the research at the different universities and our partner drug companies can help understand how to better treat our patients in clinical trials. And this, of course, leads to better care and better treatments for systemic scleroderma. I now will turn the slide set over to Dr. Assassi, who will tell you a little bit more.
Thank you, Tracy. Similar to Tracy, I'm really excited to talk about CONQUER, which has been really a collaborative effort in recent years. And as you can see, CONQUER has gone from just being an idea to a large database that will lead to better care. And this slide is about CONQUER enrollment criteria. In order to be eligible for CONQUER, patients must be 18 years of age or older, have systemic scleroderma, as already mentioned by Tracy, and they have to be within 5 years of non-Raynaud symptoms. So enrollment is really time sensitive. Why do we focus on early disease? Scleroderma tends to be more progressive early on, and we want to capture that phase of disease. If we enroll a large portion of patients who have long-standing disease, we will have skewed view of the disease progression and might actually reach wrong conclusions because we didn't capture the early phase. So it's really important to enroll patients who are in early stages of disease. How do we determine what is early stages of disease? So we look at when the first non-Raynaud symptoms started. So as you know, scleroderma can cause Raynaud's phenomenon, which is that changing of color in the fingers upon cold exposure. But scleroderma causes also other symptoms, such as puffy fingers, joint pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, acid reflux. What we choose as the starting point of disease is the first symptom, except Raynaud's phenomenon, that is attributable to scleroderma. And patients can participate in CONQUER even if they are enrolled in another registry. So enrollment in another registry or even a clinical trial doesn't preclude you from enrolling in CONQUER. And ultimately, CONQUER will benefit every scleroderma patient, even those who didn't fulfill the enrollment criteria. Next. So how do you participate in CONQUER? If you meet the enrollment criteria, which was mentioned on the previous slide, and you are a patient at a participating center, ask your doctor about enrolling. Patients will participate through their routine clinical visits, and data are captured typically twice yearly. Clinical data are captured and blood samples are collected. And patients also tell us how they feel and function by filling out patient-reported outcome surveys. These are forms that will be emailed to you, so you can fill them out at your own convenience. And typically, patients stay in the study and are followed longitudinally, but they have also the option to opt out from the study at any time. And opting out from this study does not affect their routine clinical care in any way. Patient will receive the most modern standard of care within CONQUER, and there are no experimental therapies involved in CONQUER. Next slide, please. So your privacy is extremely important to us, and there are several measures to protect your privacy. Your clinical data and data samples will be de-identified. That means there are no identifying information linked on the samples, for example. So no one can get personal information about you. CONQUER data is protected in a secure data center at the University of Utah. This data coordinating center specializes in the storage and analysis of large-scale clinical studies. This is really an experience center which has several measures to, for example, to protect your data against hacking. It's not only managing the CONQUER database, it's managing literally tens of large-scale databases from other studies, and is very experienced in protecting and your privacy and ensuring that the data quality is top-notch. The CONQUER blood samples are collected at the sites according to a standardized protocol, shipped overnight to our laboratory at the University of Texas, Houston. And they are processed according to a very standardized protocol, and they're stored in -70 freezers in order to ensure that the molecular changes don't change with storage. And our database, our biorepository has long-standing experience with processing and storing bio samples from scleroderma patients, and is the largest biorepository of scleroderma samples in the world. Next. So what are the benefits of CONQUER registry? CONQUER as a large, high quality observational cohort, which means the patients are receiving routine clinical care and we can understand the course of disease in the context of the routine clinical care, will accelerate advances in clinical care by helping us understand the different flavors of scleroderma and their course. support development of new therapies, because we are also collecting biospecimen, and these biospecimen are gonna help us to understand the molecular heterogeneity, which means the different flavors of scleroderma at the molecular level. And patients who are enrolled in CONQUER receive heightened scrutiny in a more formal setting in a specialized scleroderma center. And in the future, CONQUER will include a clinical trials platform for rapid testing of new drugs. And I would like to point out that this clinical trial platform will be separate from CONQUER. Patients who are in CONQUER would need to agree to enroll into that clinical trial platform and would need to provide a separate consent. Basically, CONQUER will always only provide routine clinical care, but it will provide the infrastructure for these future clinical trials, and enrolled patients may be eligible to participate in these clinical trials. Next slide, please. So as you can see on this map, CONQUER is truly a collaborative effort and captures a wide geographic area. And if you are seen in one of these centers, please talk to your treating rheumatologists so that they can enroll you in CONQUER if you fulfill the eligibility criteria. But if you are not seen in one of these centers, you can always email the SRF staff, and they will help you to connect with one of the centers that is geographically nearby you. Next slide, please. So these are the CONQUER institutions. I'm gonna just quickly mention them because actually, so that you find the center that is nearby you. University of Michigan, Johns Hopkins, Mass General Hospital, Northwestern, Duke is coming on board, UT Houston, MUSC, Vanderbilt, Columbia University, New York City, Hospital for Special Surgery, New York City, University of Pennsylvania, University of Utah, Stanford, George Washington University, DC, Georgetown University, DC. And as you can see, the principal investigators in CONQUER are well known to the scleroderma community. These are clinicians and researchers who have importantly contributed to our understanding of scleroderma disease course. And more importantly, they are really experienced clinicians. They have literally seen thousands of scleroderma patients and are very well equipped to understand the different flavors of scleroderma and how these different flavors of scleroderma would need different types of treatments. Next slide, please. So how can you support scleroderma by supporting CONQUER? So the success of CONQUER really depends on having large number of patients participate. The more patients who enroll, the larger the amount of information researchers will have to pursue better care and new therapies. And every patient is unique and adds important information to this database. So by enrolling, you are really contributing to this collaborative effort that can ultimately lead to better treatments in scleroderma. So if you can enroll, or even if you cannot enroll, you can do something that is really important, and that is spreading the word about CONQUER. Please become a CONQUER ambassador to encourage others to enroll. Share information about CONQUER on your social media platforms, which can be very powerful to spread the word about our study. Contribute to CONQUER. Donations at any size make a difference. Next slide, please. So CONQUER, as mentioned by Tracy and Luke, is truly a collaborative effort. It takes a village to do this type of studies. And the Scleroderma Research Foundation is the founder of the CONQUER registry and continues playing the lead role in the administration and financing of its activities. So the volunteers in Scleroderma Research Foundation and the staff have spent really hours to start this registry and now continue administering it. Obviously, the physicians involved in CONQUER are dedicating their time, but also their expertise that they have accumulated over the many years by doing their own studies to this collaborative effort. And it's really important also to mention that patients donate their time to this effort. And ultimately, this effort is also a partnership with the pharmaceutical companies who have entered into partnership with SRF and CONQUER and contribute financial support, but also expertise to the CONQUER registry. Boehringer Ingelheim is a founding partner of CONQUER registry, has basically supported CONQUER from the beginning, as if it in the phase that it was just an idea. Similarly, Janssen is a partner, and we hope that in the near future, this list will be expanded. So we welcome other companies to contribute to this partnership. So next slide, please. So if you're looking for more information about how to enroll in CONQUER or how to contribute to CONQUER, please use one of these resources. And this program will be recorded and will be posted on YouTube, so you can watch it again if you have questions. And more importantly, if you have any questions, you can always contact SRF staff. They will try to find the answer or make the connection to the right person who has the answer. Thank you very much. I will stop here, and then we will take your questions as a panel.
That is really great. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Shervin. I'm going to basically just get us started with a couple of questions while our audience is teeing up some of their thoughts. Tracy, do you want to talk a little bit about the progress that we've made to date in CONQUER, both sort of numbers of patients enrolled and numbers of centers, and where we're going with that?
Yes, absolutely. So we started the CONQUER registry at the sites that were mentioned, bringing on 2 sites, and in a short time frame have brought in 476 patients with that meet enrollment criteria and have enrolled in the study. I think the key, though, I'll say that this is not just like any other registry, because I certainly run a registry at the University of Utah. This registry, when all those 476 patients go into the database, their data is queried daily in order to be able to ensure every data point, every feature of disease is included and accurate. And so if there's any data point that's missing, or if someone has a value that doesn't seem to make sense, each investigator will be contacted. You validate to make sure that is an accurate assessment of patient. And so when I say 476, that is a really good quality patient data. And you know, Shervin can maybe even speak to the biospecimens on these patients.
Yeah, maybe before we get over that. So Tracy, tell us a little bit more about what's so important about the data quality and why we're paying so much attention and putting so much energy into that.
Absolutely. So in order to make meaningful clinical trials moving forward, you really need to understand how the disease progresses in every single patient. And so again, to really speak to every patient who's considering to join this registry, your information is so incredibly valuable. And that information needs to be accurate and reflect how you're feeling. So those patient-reported outcomes that you're filling out, that's tied into a skin score or pulmonary function tests or data from an echocardiogram. Each of the information that's important from a scleroderma standpoint is put into the database and then analyzed against other patients that may have a little bit, I like what Shervin said, different flavor of scleroderma, something that's slightly different. And so the accuracy of every individual patient is I will say, as close to perfect as you can in a registry, so that the meaningful observations can be moved forward for clinical trial design. So I think that's really what's different about this registry, is having a separate data coordinates that are in a separate biorepository, really validating, looking through, communicating back with the principal investigator so that there's no missing data and everything is very accurate. And as was stated before, there's nothing like this in the United States that's ever existed on this scale before.
Thanks, Tracy. Shervin, maybe just to sort of help put some stuff into context for our audience, what should our scleroderma community know about the biorepository that you're overseeing and have guided the collection of?
So, collection of biospecimen in a study like this requires several measures to ensure that changes at the molecular level not are introduced because the processing was different, the collection was different, the storage time was different. So what we have done in this collaborative effort have ensured that all samples are collected in the same way. They are shipped overnight. Within 24 hours, all samples are processed and according to the standardized protocol. So there are no changes introduced because the processing or the collection was different. Also, it might sound like a technicality, but that's actually important. For example, the serum samples are stored in small tubes so that they can be used for several studies and not just one study, without requiring that the big tube is thawed. Because each time you do a thaw freeze, you introduce changes in the molecular profile. What we want to know is the original molecular profile of scleroderma, not the molecular profile after the thaw freeze, multiple thaw freeze cycles. And all that is done in the CONQUER registry, which is different than many other local registries. And what we also have is we track every sample. We know how valuable your samples are. A lot of scleroderma patients are hard stick. When they have to give us one additional blood tube, it's an investment on their part. We don't take this responsibility lightly.
Thanks, Shervin. Tell us a little bit about sort of the extent of the collection today, and perhaps maybe just project out a little bit, a couple of years from now, what you envision, and maybe, if you don't mind, just sort of comparing that opportunity to what, and put that in the context of what else is available in the world, so we can help our audience understand sort of the, what we're trying to build.
Sure. So this is a relatively new registry. Other registries have had head start since the 1990s, since 2000s. But despite that, we have already enrolled 450 patients, more than 450 patients. And we have collected 926 time points from these patients. And some patients have given us a second, third, or fourth blood sample. And that is just the beginning. So we hope that CONQUER continues for many years. So we will have a longitudinal profile of the molecular flavors of scleroderma, not only the clinical flavors of scleroderma. And what is so special about CONQUER is its size is, for example, smaller than some European observational studies. But those European observational studies don't have a central biorepository. So they are not collecting all the blood samples in a standardized fashion and storing them in a central biorepository. So this is unique, and that was only possible because SRF, in partnership with pharmaceutical companies and other sponsors, provided the financial means to make that happen. That's a huge financial investment.
Thanks, Shervin. And maybe just talking a little bit about the investment and the opportunity looking forward. Let me go back to one of the points that you teed up, which is the clinical trial platform. And let me just amplify a little bit on your remarks. And I do want to emphasize, which I think you did a great job of, is that the Conquer registry includes the current, most modern standard of care for all patients. There are no experimental therapies that are included as a component of the Conquer registry. However, there's a huge opportunity with this, with the consortium of centers that we've established to think about more accelerating the testing and the evaluation of novel drugs. I think we are all aware that there has been relative paucity of novel drugs that have been introduced to our patients over the last several years, although sponsors like Janssen and Boehringer Ingelheim have made courageous efforts and have brought drugs forward. But on the whole, it's been a relatively sort of a trickle of drugs as compared to other indications. So the opportunity with the consortium of centers that we've established provides an opportunity to launch a clinical trial platform. Now that's a future effort, but if we can get that launched, it will provide an opportunity for the patients who are currently enrolled to participate and potentially get access to drugs that are not available on the market. And we're hoping, of course, through this to very rapidly evaluate candidate opportunities and identify basically novel opportunities to improve either organ-specific manifestations of scleroderma or actually true disease-modifying drugs, which is, of course, the ultimate goal here. So anyway, stay tuned. We're very excited about that opportunity and looking very much forward to it. And maybe sort of as a component of that, it's useful to talk a bit about what we're trying to imagine as we roll Conquer forward. And let me turn that back to Tracy to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do to expand the number of centers and to broaden our reach. Tracy?
Absolutely. So as mentioned by Shervin, we have looked for the scleroderma centers that are offering clinical trials opportunities to patients, have good experience with assessing scleroderma patients. And our goal is really to expand geographic reach and include better diversity in this, the samples collected. And so one of the things that I will do, if you saw my name twice, is I will fly back and forth to Nashville and start the Conquer registry in Nashville to really capture hopefully a 5-state referral basis as well and just get more patients involved. And again, I really want to highlight our passion as scleroderma doctors is giving the best standard of care. So getting you all the right treatments that are available and all the right screening so we take the best care of you possible, but also take the information from those treatments and put it in this good quality registry and get those biospecimens to Houston so that we can analyze the data and move the field forward. And we have reached out to several different investigators. Shervin and I participate in something called the American College of Rheumatology National Meeting, and we had a forum there to tell different investigators about Conquer, the importance of its mission. And we have several different people interested in participating. I don't think we can yet list their names, but I think it's really key if you're interested to reach out to the Scleroderma Research Foundation periodically and check. We also have a newsletter that we write annually and kind of give an update of the research that's come out of Conquer that the Scleroderma Research Foundation has available. So we're really interested in expanding sites and increase geographic reach and diversity of patients, and are always happy to talk to clinicians that want to start a scleroderma program and get the training necessary to participate.
Thanks, Tracy. So let's see. I think we're still, obviously, please feel free to type in your questions into the Q&A slot, and those will get forwarded from over to me as moderator. So I'll just keep going while we're waiting for some additional questions to surface. Shervin, maybe you can talk a bit about the process for how scientific studies within the Conquer community get launched and prosecuted, and talk a little bit about the process and perhaps some of the studies that have been that are on deck or do you think will soon be launched?
Sure. So all the studies that are planned for Conquer are rigorously vetted by a science committee, which includes prominent scientists in the scleroderma field who are also participants in the Conquer registry. So they know the Conquer registry really well. They know the type of data we collect, type of biospecimen we collect. And sometimes they provide feedback to make the proposals better. It's because we obviously want the best possible study to be done using this really valuable resource. And really, because if you, I'm sure you noticed from the list of the investigators that are involved, there's really a wide range of expertise already within Conquer, but also those proposals could come outside Conquer. So several pharmaceutical companies have also approached Conquer for conducting studies, either to understand the clinical course of disease or the molecular profile of the disease. And for example, we have studies about what is the practice pattern of screening for presence of interstitial lung disease in Conquer. So how do doctors look for interstitial lung disease? Because this is a disease manifestation that needs to be caught early on, and so that potential treatments can be started early on before irreversible damage has occurred. So we have now a good view of a practice pattern that is nationwide, that is not just center specific. But also there are several biomarkers studies in planning phase to look, for example, how do we predict the course of disease in the context of treatment or on those in those patients who are not on treatment, which emphasizes the fact that the more patients we enroll, the better studies we can do, because it's not only that there's heterogeneity or different flavors in the clinical course, there is also different treatment options. So the molecular profile will be different depending on the treatment. So we are subgrouping the subgroups. So we really need large numbers to understand this disease better.
Great.
Look, I'm seeing several questions regarding how long they have to stay in Conquer.
Yeah.
So basically, Conquer is an ongoing study. You stay in this study as long as Conquer is ongoing, but you have always the option of opting out.
And then do we want to talk at all about, maybe we should talk a little bit more about distance from the first non-Raynaud's. I think there's some questions about enrollment criteria when if patients had symptoms that overlap the Raynaud's and distance, you know, how do we count distance from that early event in terms of adjudicating suitability for enrollment? Maybe there's a few more comments. Tracy, do you want to take that on?
Sure, absolutely. And so there was a lot of discussion on this point, and the reason that this discussion point is so important is to highlight we really want to understand how the disease progresses. And in some patients, there may be Raynaud's that occurred many, many years ago, but in discussion with your physician, we decide that your onset of scleroderma occurred within the 5-year eligibility point, so that you're eligible for the study. There'll be other times that you may talk to your physician, and your Raynaud's started 7 years ago, and really it was that first, in your discussion with your physician, really that several symptoms came really rapidly after that, and so it really did seem to be that first kind of heralding mark of systemic sclerosis. And so what's really key with that non-Raynaud's phenomenon criteria is a discussion with your physician about all your different symptoms to really decide when did systemic sclerosis start. Because again, that first 5 years, you really want to understand understand how it progresses. And so if we start to enroll patients that were maybe larger than that first 5 years, that skews the data, as Shervin mentioned. So really, if you have questions or you're not really quite sure when your scleroderma started, the best place to start is a discussion with your physician, who will talk to you about puffy hands, about shortness of breath, about all the many things that can be that first symptom of scleroderma. And then once in that discussion, that's why it's really important to be seen at a scleroderma center to identify that. When did disease start? And are you eligible for this study? Then that discussion for enrollment can start. But I really want to highlight that comment. Like, if you, I can imagine patients would be kind of disappointed if they came in and they were told, you know what, you're 7 years after this discussion, we don't think you meet enrollment criteria. Still, you benefit from this registry. So what we learn from this registry, we can apply back to every single patient. And I think it's really important that everyone's an advocate for research and understanding of disease, how the disease progresses. So use your social media platforms to try to encourage other patients, because the sooner we can get larger numbers, the sooner we can move into that next stage where we can really understand how to get clinical trials back to patients better.
Maybe it's useful to talk a bit about sort of our interactions with our pharmaceutical partners, Shervin. I know there's oftentimes a little bit of anxiety about access to data from industry partners and so forth, and you know, I believe that they deserve a real shout out for their willingness to have the vision to participate with us when there's, I'd say, at least in the very early days here, not much payback for them, and I really want to applaud their willingness to take the long view of improving care for scleroderma patients. But with that, it was a little bit of a tee up. Shervin, maybe you want to just talk a little bit about our historical interactions and some of the support that we've received and where we're going with those relationships.
Sure. So I just wanted to second what Luke had mentioned. Clearly, scleroderma is a disease where better treatments are still need to be developed. There are recently 2 FDA-approved drugs only for the lung manifestation, and they're not FDA approved for skin. But this is clearly an area of unmet need. And scleroderma is a rare disease. It really requires a community. And the pharmaceutical companies are part of that community. Because when they invest into a rare disease, they are taking a huge risk, because they might not be able to enroll enough patients. The study might be negative. And scleroderma is a multifaceted disease where fibrosis, immune system, and vascular changes, changes in your vessels are interacting. So it really requires the whole community coming together, and pharmaceutical companies are an important partner in that effort. And having said that, for example, Boehringer Ingelheim has been with Conquer from the beginning, when it was an idea where there was, this could have gone totally wrong because something similar has never been done before in the US. So they could have sponsored this and that could have gone nowhere. So they took a risk in us, and thanks to SRF's effort and the partnership with the academic centers, we have been able to launch this really large-scale collaborative effort. Also, other pharmaceutical companies such as Janssen has come on board, and hopefully other future pharmaceutical companies will come on board, because the more resources we have, the more research we can do. The more research we can do, the better we understand the disease, and ultimately we will provide better care to our scleroderma patients. But having said that, even if the pharmaceutical companies want to do a study using the Conquer resource, they go through the same procedure. They write a proposal, it goes to a science committee, which is independent of pharmaceutical companies, reviews the science for its rigorousness, making sure that we provide feedback, because again, we don't want to take this really valuable resource, your blood samples, your clinical data, and do a suboptimal study. So again, that fosters this back and forth of knowledge, because obviously pharmaceutical companies have a tremendous amount of expertise. So it ultimately really accelerates the research. And again, your privacy is protected. They will never receive identifying information. Also, academic researchers will never receive identifying information. So the privacy is really is protected, and we keep this we take this responsibility very seriously.
That's great, thank you. Maybe it's just, I don't think there's, hopefully there's no confusion, but maybe we should just emphasize that patients don't have to experience any sort of additional sort of inconvenience in participating in Conquer. Just want to talk about sort of how you would normally treat a patient and why we've specifically designed Conquer to fit with that, basically, if you will, kind of traditional paradigm, and talk a little bit about that so patients can understand what we're asking of them.
Absolutely. So when a patient comes into clinic, your physician asks you questions and does a physical exam and obtains routine monitoring studies. And so what the registry did is all these expert centers, the physicians got together and discussed the data elements that they collect in the routine clinical visit. And what I really like that term, modern standard of care. What we did is we learned from each other. So we have one investigator who's very interested in cancer screening. And what she really brought to the registry said, this is really how I ask about cancer screening, and this is what I believe the standard of care to be. And so we learned from her, and we said, okay, we really need to make sure when we're doing our routine scleroderma evaluation that we're asking these questions and ensuring cancer screening is up to date. And so what the physician will do is fill out extensive forms, and that's usually done after the visit. So there's no, your visit's not going to last much longer, but all those data elements that all 13 scleroderma physicians said, these are the critical aspects of my clinical care. Every Conquer patient gets all those questions asked at their care visit. Then that data is put in a password protected database and tied to that biospecimen that's sent to Houston. And so all these sort of, high level scleroderma questions are asked and answered. And let's just say I forgot to ask the question, then a query would be generated to me and said, Tracy, you forgot to ask this question. Do you have that information? That gives you the opportunity then to make sure that data element is taken and put into the registry. So then I may look and say, well, I should look to see if there's a mammogram available. So I'm going to make sure I get that data. Yes, a mammogram was done, and yes, it was normal. So there's the benefit to the patient is that high level of expertise that was a collection of minds from all the different scleroderma centers is the Conquer database. That's what we ask, and that's those questions are what we ask, and then that's placed and analyzed so we can understand those data elements. So there was a lot of effort that went into making sure this is like the modern best scleroderma registry available for our patients.
Great. And just in terms of frequency of visits, I mean, would you say that you would typically encourage a patient to visit with you twice a year? So that's sort of a pretty typical schedule, which is the schedule we're collecting Conquer information on?
Absolutely. And so that's another, I think, really important point is when you're a Conquer patient, let's say you might have canceled your visit. When you're a Conquer patient, we're alerted that the patient has canceled, and we ensure that you get back into clinic. And that was particularly important during the COVID pandemic, that we were seeing our patients, even if it was virtually by telehealth, to ensure that a patient has been visibly seen and questions have been asked to ensure that we understand sort of the state of scleroderma symptoms. So it doesn't add any burden to a patient as far as they're not forced to come in for a visit, but it alerts us if you've missed an appointment to ensure that we understand why you didn't come into clinic. And yes, 6 months, particularly early in disease, patients should be seen because we really want to understand a change in skin score, a change in symptoms, and that you get the best treatments to treat scleroderma in those early stages. So I personally don't believe it's a burden to any patient, and it actually benefits to really expertise care.
Great, thanks. Yeah, And Shervin, just to talk a little bit about other tissue, obviously we're collecting blood. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the molecular markers? Obviously, we can't go too deep from a technical perspective, but I think it's helpful for people to understand sort of what's on the horizon and how we try and think about a molecular sort of profiling and the opportunity that provides for our patients.
So thank you, Luke, for this question, because it's actually really important to point out that we are living in a very exciting time where the technology has enabled us to view the molecular profile of these really complicated diseases by taking a small amount of serum sample or using a technology called PAX gene tube, where in biology, the most stable structure is DNA. RNA is less stable, and protein is very unstable. So, and that's by design, it's supposed to be like that, because DNA is your genetic material. RNA is switched on and off, and protein has to be switched on and off quicker. So for example, PAX gene tube has this really amazing technology that immediately after the blood draw, all your RNA material is stabilized. It's exactly, it is as it exits your blood and remains as it is. So it can be transported overnight to our freezers and stays in our freezer, in -70 freezers, and it can stay there for many years. So we can really do future studies. For example, as I was going through my fellowship, I could measure the gene expression profile of one gene at a time. It would take me a month. Now I can measure the gene expression profile of 30,000 genes in 1 hour. So it's really the technology aiding us. It would be a pity if we don't have the samples, if we don't have the clinical data to use this really top-notch technology to make a difference in the lives of patients with scleroderma.
That's a great explanation. Thank you. We're running up sort of against our time. I just want to really thank our scleroderma leaders, Dr. Shervin Assassi and Dr. Tracy Frech. You guys were fantastic discussants. Really appreciate the clarity that you're bringing to this webinar, and of course your incredible investment, all volunteered and generously provided on behalf of all the scleroderma patients on a nationwide basis to help bring this Conquer registry to life and to continue to advance it. So I think we all owe you a huge thank you, not only for today, but for all of your efforts. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us.
And I just want to emphasize that to all of you who are listening, that this is, it does take a village. I think Shervin was very articulate, and I think Tracy echoed that, not only in launching this, but in amplifying the voice that we have. So please, we're very serious. We need everyone to be an ambassador. This effort really only succeeds if we can ultimately enroll a few thousand patients. And of course, we need to applaud our patients who have enrolled and continue to support them to stay with us over hopefully many, many years. That's the whole point of this. We have made huge efforts to make sure this is not an additional burden, but of course, it does require that patients are willing to stay in and continue to fill out, as an example, the surveys and so forth that are so valuable to the data, and ultimately our ability to understand the dimensions of this disease. So cheers and hats off to all the patients who've currently enrolled. We look forward to the support from all of you to reach out to your patient friends and new patients and encourage them to take part and to be part of this huge effort that we have undertaken now to ultimately bring this bring a better understanding of this disease and of course ultimately better treatments forward. So with that, let me conclude and again, thank our discussants and thank the team at the SRF and Deanne Wright, Chairman of the Research Committee at the SRF, who's put a huge amount of effort into getting this webinar put together for all of us. Thank you. Good day.